Hey everyone, it's Tristan again with another episode of Should You Summon. As always, I'm going to be presenting high-level overviews to help you decide whether this banner is worth your hard-earned vouchers and crystals. This month's banner is for more new Langrisser mobile original characters, Isolde and Jayce, running from February 29th to March 27th. As a rate-up banner, any SSR you pull has a 40% chance of being either featured character, with the remaining 20% chance reserved for any random off-banner unit in the regular summoning pool, including Andy, Namiya, and Eshin, if you weren't lucky enough to summon them recently. Alright, let's get started with Isolde. By the way, if you don't know why it's funny that I'm the one recording this part for Isolde, go read a book or something. Anyway, Isolde continues Zlong's tradition of releasing OP units that bring a lot of versatility to the table, but at heart, she's a bulky killing machine. Her gimmick is kind of like her fellow dragon Oboro in that she takes a few turns to build up to full power. Instead of standing perfectly still and picking up stacks, she gains one of 3 buffs after acting, so she can still do other stuff while she ramps up. One talent buff lets her ignore guard. One gives her 25% skill damage, and one gives her skills a -1 cooldown. Once you have all 3 buffs active, you get 25% damage dealt, and the ability to act again after attacking. These buffs are all permanent. On top of this, her talent also gives her unconditional 25% attack and defense at 6 star. If you're fighting a dragon class enemy like Bernhardt, Oboro, or Isolde, that's doubled to 50%. Her 1-cost skill is her chivalry-like Act Again. She gets debuff immunity and a shield worth 25% of her max HP, and she can move 4 more blocks before attacking. Her 2-cost skill is actually 3 skills in 1, each associated with one of her talent buffs. The Guard Ignore buff unlocks a ranged, single-target attack that lets her move 3 spaces afterwards. The Skill Damage buff unlocks a self-centered AoE that inflicts buff block and revive block. And the Cooldowns buff unlocks a self-centered group heal that also gives regeneration and a 15% damage reduction. A hit and run, an AoE, and a heal all in one skill. Just in case you were worried she doesn't do everything, her 3-cost skill passively casts a Mythical Realm faction buff every time you get one of her talent buffs, or use her talent's Act Again. When used actively, it's a 1.6 times damage, single target melee attack. If you have 2 or more talent buffs, the target can't counter. After battle, it follows up with an AoE blast to the target and units behind it in a 3x3 line. As a bonus, if this skill gets a kill, and I struggle to see why it wouldn't, you pick up a random talent buff, helping you to max her even more quickly. Although, if she's already killed something and she's not even maxed yet, your battle is probably going well. She's a member of Mythical Realm, buffed by Gizaroth, Sage of the Trees, and herself, Yales Legends, buffed by Landius and Sigma, and Meteor Strike, buffed by Zerida and Epsilon. Her faction buff for Mythical Realm increases melee attack damage by 15%, and reduces reflect damage taken by 30%. For bonds, she unlocks the defensive bond for her bannermate Jayce, she needs Jayce for her own defensive bond, and Precia for her attack bond. For content, in PvE she's on faction for Phoenix and Scylla in the Eternal Temple, and Jormungandr, Fenrir, and Nidhogg in Ancient Beckoning. Just like Oboro, once she's ramped up, her permanent buffs and Act Again will make her an essential member of high-scoring leaderboard teams for Jormungandr and Nidhogg. As an auto-buffer, she can also generally be useful in most normal PvE content. On the PvP side, she's another strong meta unit. She's a very common first ban and a common first pick when she's not banned. In the latest season of Chinese Playoff, she and Awakener were tied with a 100% box rate. That speaks for itself, at least till Kong gets to the notes for noobs later. Finally, for her build, Full Moon is the most common enchant. You could also use Breeze, but she's one of the top users of the new Breeze Wings accessory, so it's usually not needed. You can't go wrong with Ragnarok, Last Rites, and Wings. Her helm is a little more up in the air. I've seen people use Bonnet, Njord's Feathered Crown, and Tyr. For Ancient Beckoning, you'd obviously go with Blazing Sun and Crystal Stinger for max crit damage output. Well, I should probably stop harping on about Isolde or I might get hurt, so here's Kong with some information about Jayce.
Alright, thanks Tristan for that excellent summary of Isolde. I will pick up where you left off and carry on with Jayce. Jayce is a new PvP-focused mage with a teleportation gimmick. After acting, the space he's standing on gets marked with an arcane trace terrain effect. This terrain acts as an aura that boosts nearby allies' attack and int by 10%, and reduces nearby enemies' MDef by 10%. After he attacks, he can teleport back to one of his arcane traces, which removes it from the map. This is helpful for letting him jump back to safety after going on a dangerous little adventure. His unique one-cost skill is another teleport, which lets him select either himself, an unoccupied piece of defensive terrain, or an unoccupied allied arcane trace within 5 spaces, jump there, move 2 more spaces, and attack. His unique 2-cost skill is a 5-range, 3-span AoE that applies another kind of annoying terrain aura. Enemies within 2 spaces get minus 10% MDef, and it costs additional mobility to try to move away. Enemies who end turns still within the aura get teleported back into the center of it. Finally, his 3-cost skill gives him plus 10% damage dealt for each allied arcane trace on the map, up to a maximum of 30%. It's a 3-range, 1.6 times damage single target attack that's effective against every class type except mage. It also lets his ranged soldiers join in on this attack if they aren't 3-range natively, which most aren't. If the target of the attack currently has an MDef reduction effect, like the ones conveniently caused by his tiles and his AoE, this attack ignores guard. So I think you can see where all this is going. The play is typically to set up a nice safe arcane trace back at home, then teleport ahead, snipe someone with 3C, and use the talent teleport to jump back to safety. Fair and balanced. He's a member of Mythical Realm, buffed by Gizaroth, the Sage of the Trees, and Isolde, Yales Legends, buffed by Landius and Sigma, and Origins of Light, buffed by Dihart, Jugler, and Freya. For bonds, he unlocks the defensive bond for his bannermate Isolde. For his own bonds, he needs Isolde for his defensive bond, and Light of Genesis for his attack bond. For content, in PvE he's on faction for Phoenix and Valkyrie in the Eternal Temple, and Jormungandr, Fenrir, and Nidhogg in Ancient Beckoning. I haven't seen him used for any high-scoring runs on those fights. I think because they're usually well encapsulated enough that teleporting around the map isn't really something that helps a lot. He's definitely much more of a PvP mage, for the reasons already hinted at earlier. Being able to threaten at long ranges while still hanging back with the team makes him an effective zoner. And he can ignore guard, which is something that's always useful in PvP. For his build, I've seen him run in both his mage and his holy classes, although holy seems to be a little bit more common. You'll just have to decide which one you like best based on what you're doing with him and what his threats are. Scepter can give him even more range when engaging, but if you think his teleport gets him close enough, you can also go with a Red Moon for fatter stats, or even a Gift of Eternal Life if he's holy, for some extra healing. Tenyo's Robe or Nebulous to protect from reflect damage, Tenyo's Hat or Star Crown if you have extras to boost his damage. Like Light of Genesis, you can get away with using the Laws of Creation book accessory since his 3C is effective against most classes. That gives you 10% more damage. You could also use Twilight Star for pre-battle fixed to help him assassinate certain targets. Alright, let's move on to the notes for noobs. Isolde is a must-summon meta-altering unit for PvP who turns out to be strong and useful in the right kinds of ways to make an impact in PvE as well. She's a common first pick, she's a common first ban, she has an automatic faction buff, she's used to leaderboard in at least 2 Ancient Beckoning fights. Oboro is great in Ancient Beckoning too, but he's kind of a dud in normal PvE modes because you don't want a unit standing around for 3 turns. Well, Isolde doesn't have that problem. I know this is the 3rd month in a row that I've said this, but she's a must-summon. Jayce unlocks Isolde's bonds. That's almost enough on its own to make him worth summoning, but he's also a powerful magical assassin in his own right. If you play PvP, he's a powerful option for your box for the next couple seasons at least. Finally, just my usual reminder about upcoming banners. Next week's featured raid-up banner will have the return of Nymph and Prescia, and there's a convenient way to get your Isolde's attack bond if you missed her the first time. The week after that is a Destiny banner featuring Epsilon, Listel, and Leo Beck. Finally, the last week of the MU should give us a Destiny banner featuring Akka, Young Jessica, and Jayce's attack bond unlocker, Light of Genesis. We'll also get the recurring banner featuring Landius, Yulia, and Jugler. Next month's headliners are the new Gun and Patricia. They don't end up being as high priority summons as the OP units we've gotten over the past few months. The month after them is the new Guyver crossover, and if you're a crossover collector or a fellow Guyver superfan, that's totally exciting. But if you're not, it ends up being a little more niche than some previous collabs, so you might be able to cool it on the summoning for a couple of months, depending on your goals. Anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. I've been playing a Mythical Realm box all season with Sage of the Trees and Transcender, units that don't often see some play, and over the course of like 60 games, I've been learning firsthand exactly why they don't see a lot of play. So obviously, I'm going to have to go all in for my new faction buffer. If you want to see someone blow through like 800 summons, stay tuned for my summoning stream on Thursday, because I'm basically going to use my entire stash to try to get her starred up as much as possible from summoning. I'm not sure exactly what time I'll start though, so make sure to hit the notification bell below if you don't want to miss it. Thanks again to Tristan for coming over and helping me with this episode. I thought that would be an obvious synergy with Tristan and Isolde. And thank you so much for watching. I wish you all the best of luck on your summons this week. I'll catch you in my summoning stream, and then again in the next Should You Summon. Extra special thanks, of course, to our Langrisser tier channel members for generously supporting the channel directly. Shout out to Levitt, Kate Soon, Jared Portela, Jerome Meyer, Harambe, and the Midland Guild. Thank you so much for your support, everyone.